Hey y'all, hey, it's Kim Alexander with Moms of Black Boys United. Happy July 5th. I am, as you can see around me, I am actually in my hotel room. I'm in Minneapolis. I am with our DC chapter leader. We are supporting the Castile family as we remember Philando Castile. And yesterday was July 4th, and I'm sitting here with 1 day old tea that tastes like coffee because they don't never clean that pot right. And just sitting here thinking of the implications of being here, of being in Minneapolis at this time during this weekend, roughly about a month since George Floyd was killed here, and 4 years, excuse me, 8 years since Philando Castile was killed here. Um, and just thinking about my people and what that feels like and looks like as we adopt this country that we were given, you know, without permission. Our ancestors didn't ask to be here. We were put here, and we have spent the last few hundred years making the best, truly making the best of being here. And I was at the airport yesterday, and I was standing in line at Budget Rent a Car, and there was a young black man across the way at Hertz, and he had on a flag hat, and he had on a flag jacket, and he had a pin on, and he had an American flag on his desk, and was playing music, and it was America the Beautiful and the Star Spangled Banner, and everything that he was playing was related to July 4th. And he was truly in the spirit. Like, this was his country. And at first I was going to do this yesterday, and I was like, no, Kim, you're not going to be a Debbie Downer. You're not going to, sit here and throw salt in the game and make people feel like they shouldn't, or make black people feel like they shouldn't celebrate July 4th. And as I sat in my hotel room, I was like, I've heard parts of the Declaration of Independence, and you study it in school and all of that stuff. But I found myself wanting to hear the words. First, I wanted to see what year it was. It's 1776. And then I wanted to really read the words as an adult, where I have a better understanding of this country, a better understanding of what these words mean, a better understanding of all of those things. And so I went down to the business center and I printed out Declaration of Independence. This was my first stop in my little rabbit hole. And I'm not going to read all of this, but I do want to read one paragraph. And it says, we hold these truths to be self evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed, that whenever any form, lost my spot, whenever any form of government becomes destructive to these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and to institute new government, laying its foundation on such principles and organizing its powers in such form as to them shall seem most likely to affect their safety and happiness. Prudence indeed will dictate that governments long established should not be changed for light and transient causes, and accordingly, all experience hath shown that mankind are more disposed to suffer while evils are sufferable than to right themselves by abolishing the forms to which they are accustomed. But when a long train of abuses, pursuing invariably the same object, evinces a design to reduce them under absolute despotism, it is their right, it is their duty to throw off such government and to provide new guards for their future security. Such has been the patient sufferance of these colonies, and such is now the necessity which constrains them to alter their former systems of government. The history of the present king and of Great Britain is a history of repeated injuries, all having indirect object the establishment of an absolute tyranny over the states. To prove this, let facts be submitted to a candid world. And I know that was a lot, and some of it is old English and not how we talk nowadays. But in 1776, our people were still in chains. America sought to break away from British tyranny while creating the same circumstances right here with our people. The people they are talking about are not ours. The July 4th they celebrate is not ours. So, what do you guys think? The Declaration of Independence had nothing to do with our independence. Nothing at all. The 13 colonies were completely and totally okay with our suffrage, okay with them being the people to afflict tyranny, were okay with breaking up our families. They were okay with all of those things. And here's a better question. With the experiences of Black people in this America, has it not been time to overthrow our government? Now, I'm not saying that's what we need to do, but if we followed the letter of the law that is described in the Declaration of Independence, have we not experienced those things? Do you feel safe? Do you feel like you have the ability to pursue happiness? I don't know. Tell me in the comments. Tell me. Like, is that how you're feeling? I know as a mom of a Black boy, two of them, the mom of two Black daughters, I feel stifled and suffocated in 2024 by what's going on. So I had time, right? So I kept digging. Don't judge me. I got to sit in with my day OT and was looking at other dates and what how this country kind of got with stuff. And I was like, well, if 1776 was the Declaration of Independence, how long did it take for the Civil War to happen? So the Civil War was April 12th, 1861 to May 26th, 1865. So 4 years we were at war trying to get ourselves out of shackles. But even more interesting is that is nearly 100 years since these Americas said, this ain't how we want to live, but still did not have any problems bringing our ancestors here as slaves. So here comes the Civil War, right? And here comes Abraham Lincoln. And I learned today that the Emancipation Proclamation was not actually what really freed us, right? Like the entire nation. The Emancipation Proclamation was the impetus to the Confederates to free their slaves. But it was not until, wait, let me get the year right. 2 years later, in 1865, that the 13th Amendment went into effect, which was truly our freedom. Now, I want you to think about these dates, right? Because in a little while, I want to talk a little bit about the Civil Rights Movement, because we had the Civil War, right? So we had the Emancipation Proclamation. We had we had the war with Great Britain, and we got July 4th, 1776. Took another 100 years and another war to free the people right here at home, right? The people who were brought here in the Middle Passage. Took another 2 years to get the 13th Amendment. But the Civil Rights Movement was another 100 years later. So then I started looking at the Emancipation Proclamation. And I'm an old lady, so I'm about that pen and paper, and I'm going to write on it, and I'm going to circle stuff, and I'm going to do all of that stuff. And so I looked, and so the Emancipation Proclamation, January 1st, 1963. And I want to just read one portion of this where it says that on the first day of January in the year of our Lord, 1863, all persons held as slaves within any state or designated part of a state, the people whereof shall then be in rebellion against the United States, shall be then thenceforward and forever free. And the executive government of the United States, including the military and naval authority thereof, will recognize and maintain the freedom of such persons, and will do no act or acts to repress such persons of any of them in any efforts they may make for their actual freedom. And then it says, and I hereby enjoin upon the people so declared to be free to abstain from all violence unless necessary self-defense. And I recommend to them that in all cases, when allowed, they labor faithfully for reasonable wages. So this was put into place January 1st, 1863. And my question to y'all is, when is it going to really be enacted? Because when we speak out, we're aggressive. When we comply, we're aggressive. When we march, we're aggressive. When we riot, we're aggressive. So the Declaration of Independence gave any persons who is a citizen of the United States this ever elusive ability to overthrow the government for tyranny. Then the Emancipation Proclamation said that we can rebel for self-defense. Then you get to the 13th Amendment, and it says, neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime, whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist within the United States or any place subject to their jurisdiction. Congress shall have power to enforce this article by appropriate legislation. In one man's interpretation, he says, slavery is America's original sin. Despite the bold commitment to equality in the Declaration of Independence, slavery was legal in all the 13 colonies in 1776. By the start of the Civil War, 4 million people, nearly all of African descent, were held as slaves in 15 southern and border states. Slaves represented 1/8 of the U.S. population in 1860. 1/8 of the population in 1860 were slaves. 4 million slaves resided on this continent against their own free will 100 years after the Declaration of Independence. The true abolition of slavery was achieved when the 13th Amendment was ratified on December 6, 1865. The first section of the amendment declares neither slavery nor involuntary servitude, except as a punishment for crime whereof the party shall have been duly convicted, shall exist in the United States. Is it just me, or does anybody else feel like that was the culmination of the school to prison pipeline? If the one place, the one time, the one thing that you can enslave me for is a crime, and in 2024, we are 13% of the population, but 60% of those incarcerated. Is it just me? I mean, y'all tell me, is it just me? You know, I ain't about that conspiracy theory, but let's talk about it. Then it says, the amendment is unique in the Constitution because it bars every person from holding slaves or engaging in other forms of involuntary servitude, whereas most constitutional provisions only constrain or regulate the government. So we actually had to put an amendment in to regulate my skin color. We just celebrated the Crown Act. So in 2024, we're regulating my hair. In 1865, we regulating my skin. But on July 5th, 2024, we celebrating a life going too soon, taken by police officers of a young man who was compliant and still ended up dead, and nobody was convicted. Like Kenya said, the math ain't mathing. But I'm just, I'm sharing the facts. This ain't Kimberly talking. This is, look, I got paper. So I kept digging, and I was like, well, Dad, what else does it say? Then it says, Section 2 of the 13th Amendment has broader applicability as well. The Supreme Court has long held this provision also allows Congress to pass laws to eradicate the badges and incidents of slavery. But it was 2020 when we was kicking over monuments, right? So 13th Amendment, let me get the year right, 1865. But in 2020, in the uprising following the murder of George Floyd, we were still kicking over monuments and pulling down Confederate flags in the name of that's our history. The Supreme Court has never defined the full scope of what the badges and incidents of slavery are, and instead has left it to Congress to flesh out a definition. In the civil rights cases 1883, the court held that racial discrimination in private inns, theaters, and public transportation do not qualify as a badge or incident of slavery. What? So you can tell me where to sit. I can't go through the front door. I could be homeless and sleep on the street. I can't go into theaters. I can't do any of these things. But this doesn't constitute a badge of slavery. But the only reason why I can't go into those places is because I'm Black. And the only reason why you don't like Black is because we're less than and we were slaves. But that's not a badge of slavery. So in a series of cases in the 1960s and the 1970s, however, the court held that racial discrimination by private housing developers and private schools is among the badges and incidents of slavery that Congress may outlaw under Section 2 of the 13th Amendment. Most recently, Congress has determined that Section 2 provides a basis for a portion of the Matthew Shepard and James Byrd Jr. Hate Crimes Prevention Act of 2009. No disrespect to Matthew Shepard or James Byrd Jr., but I have to point out that neither one of them are Black. Like these are not incidents about us. So, it's like we can't discriminate. But now it's a hate crime when it's a crime about somebody else. And let's point out that that's still 2009. That's 2009. It is so much. But even with that being said, the last line of this paragraph says the Supreme Court has yet to evaluate these laws. So the Supreme Court remains silent in these conversations, right? They remain quiet in these conversations. I remember when we were in elementary school, when I was in elementary school, right? And every morning I would get up and it was like, it's time to pledge allegiance. We all know the Pledge of Allegiance, right? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. That was written in 1892. Liberty and justice for all in 1892. Did it exist? I don't know. It was roughly about 30 years after Juneteenth. So maybe not. I know we were still following our people hanging from trees. Ku Klux Klan was still out there. We weren't, we were still plowing fields and walking around with calluses and blood dripping from our hands from taming the horses and pulling the plows and picking cotton. I don't know too many people who got the 40 acres and a mule, so I don't know. What y'all thinking? Because I could go down a rabbit hole all day, like I'm good for that. Y'all have any thoughts? Then I was sitting there and I was like, so when was like the American flag done? 1777. When did we get the Statue of Liberty? 1886. Like all of these major monuments and major milestones in this country don't belong to us. They don't belong to us. So I think back to the young man who was celebrating. He was just like, he was celebrating his country and he was celebrating what was going on in 1776. I'm sorry, I'm making a whole bunch of noise with paper. Um, he was celebrating what was going on in 1776 and he was dressed for the occasion. And he was playing all of these songs, Yankee Doodle and um, all of that stuff. And then I sit here and I think about Project 2025, right? When I think about where police came from, slave patrols, and I think about a candidate who says stuff like, I'm going to indemnify the police. And I think about my children not feeling safe to be outside. And I think about how I still make less money than my white counterparts, or the 60% of our Black men and boys who are incarcerated. I think about the 960 something people who have already been killed this year by police. All of the stories we don't see on the television. And I think about the people who die in custody, Black people disproportionately, that nobody ever hears about because they weren't shot. The Sandra Blands of the world. I think about Botham Jean, who was in his house, minding his business, and Breonna Taylor. And I'm wondering how many of us really feel like we have life, liberty, and the right to pursue happiness. I think about the 50% of Black children who are expelled from preschool for ages and stages behavior, and the other 30% who are left back. I think about suicide being the highest killer for Black boys and men in 2024. And anxiety and depression being the number one diagnosis for our children. I think about food insecurity, housing insecurity, work insecurity. I see all the memes. I know, we sitting around joking about Black jobs, this, that, and the third. But our people are afraid to have kids. The generation behind mine and the one behind that one doesn't want to birth children. They don't want to bring more children into this world for fear of not being able to live in this world. But I got all of this paper. Look. All of this paper here. All of it is a lot of words to tell me and you that we have a right to pursue happiness, that we have a right to live without fear. We have a right to question our government. We have a right to demand something different of our government, that we should be protected under our governing bodies, that we should be protected by the Supreme Court. And I'm just trying to figure out where it is. Where is it? What street can I go drive down to go find it? What person can I go talk to go find it? What entity can I show up at that will allow me to go to sleep before my son comes home? I'm looking for that place. So then I said, well, you looked up all of this ancient stuff, all of these things that happened in 17 something and 18 something. When did Martin Luther King have a dream? So I had to go find that, right? So I did. I went and I found it. And I pulled, not his whole speech because that's super long, but excerpts from his speech, 1963. In 1963, despite the 13th Amendment, Emancipation Proclamation, in the Declaration of Independence, the Civil War, severing our relationship with Great Britain, despite all of those things, we were still dreaming in 1963. And what makes me even sadder is that we still dreaming in 2024. We still dreaming. So in Martin Luther King Jr.'s I Have a Dream speech, March on Washington, he says, we cannot walk alone. And as we walk, we must make the pledge that we shall always march ahead. We cannot turn back. There are those who are asking the devotees of civil rights, when will we be satisfied? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. Tyranny. Tyranny. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. Is that not the very definition? If we live every single day afraid of what will happen when we or our children leave our homes, or what at this point can potentially happen in our homes, is that not tyranny right there? We can never be satisfied as long as the Negro is the victim of the unspeakable horrors of police brutality. We can never be satisfied as long as our bodies, heavy with fatigue of travel, cannot gain lodging in the motels of the highways and the hotels of the cities. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro's basic mobility is from a smaller ghetto to a larger one. We can never be satisfied as long as our children are stripped of their adulthood and robbed of their dignity by signs stating for whites only. We cannot be satisfied as long as the Negro in Mississippi cannot vote and the Negro in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote. Baby, if that is not history repeating itself, first of all, we may not have for whites only signs, but please tell me how it is that our children are still being stripped of their dignity. Stripped of their adulthood, shot dead in the street. Jordan Edwards, Tamir Rice, shot dead in the street. It's sad that I can roll off a ton of names of children under the age of 18 that have been gunned down in the street by police officers and vigilantes. So they have been robbed of their adulthood, 2024. and robbed of their dignity. 2024, there is a young man in Texas right now that can't wear his dress. He has been kicked out of school, expelled, not permitted to walk, not permitted to learn, not permitted to be educated because he has dreadlocks in his hair, because he chooses to wear his hair, how it grows out his head and how it forms on the top of his head, to be his authentic self, to express himself through his hair. He is right now expelled from school, and his family has to hire a lawyer. He will never get that time back. He will never get that time back. Are they not preventing us from voting? All these new laws and requirements and making it difficult and long lines. But even greater than that, and the Negro in New York believes he has nothing for which to vote. That's the everyday conversation on my feed right now. Everyday conversation. Where the people feel like there is no point in their vote. We are being silenced once again by what's going on in this world. So Martin Luther King Jr. goes on to say, I say to you today, my friends, even though we face the difficulties of today and tomorrow, I still have a dream. He died with that dream. And I sit here today because I don't want to die with mine. I don't want to die with the dream that my children will grow old and bounce their grandchildren on their lap and see their grandchildren born and have the job that they desire and work in the places that they desire and be welcomed in any place in this country. He said, it's a dream deeply rooted in the American dream. What is the American dream? Because the American dream never included us. We just talked about that, right? Declaration of Independence. Then we looked at Emancipation Proclamation. We looked at the 13th Amendment. We looked at what year the Star Spangled Banner was written. We looked at what year was the Pledge of Allegiance written. We looked at when the Statue of Liberty got to us. Like, we looked at all of these things, right? That's before us, before we were even considered human beings. So what is the American dream? What is the American dream for us? Could it not be more than I want to live? Could it not be more than I don't want to be hungry? Could it not be more than I don't want to be homeless? Could it not be more than I want my kids to be able to be authentic? Because I feel like that's the American dream for us right now. The American dream for us right now is basic human rights. We continue to fight for the basic human rights of controlling our person, being treated fairly, being given a fair education, to be authentic in ourselves, to learn our history. These are the things we're still fighting for. As they throw our books out and tell us what parts of slavery we can talk about, just in the fragility of this world right now. We fighting for safety. Mob United is fighting for safety. Like, is that not one of the most basic things we should have? Like, I don't know. Martin Luther King, probably one of the most famous parts of his speech. I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. I have a dream I have a dream that one day in Alabama, with this vicious racist, with his governor having his lips dripping with the words of interposition and nullification, one day right there in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I saw a post by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s son not too long ago. He's still on the freedom train. He is still fighting this good fight and committed to the work that his father started. I wish it was different. I wish the title of this wasn't free-ish. I want to be free. I want to be safe. I want to be whole. In this little rabbit hole I fell down, though I already knew it, I realized again that July 4th is not my holiday. And it's okay if it's yours. But we need to figure out a way to really make it ours. Free or free-ish? You tell me.